Get it, lady.
She was much more than a roommate. To those who knew them, Helen was family, Freeman's quiet anchor in a stormy business. But the exact nature of their relationship remained unspoken, a mystery Freeman guarded with fierce loyalty. In a town obsessed with headlines and personal revelations, Freeman built a fortress around her private world. And as audiences laughed at her on-screen chaos, her real life was one of silence, routine, and emotional refuge, far from the spotlight's reach. Still, that tension between visibility and invisibility defined Freeman's entire career. She was in some of the biggest shows and films of the 20th century, yet her name often disappeared from the credits. Her performances praised, but not preserved. And maybe that's what makes her story so striking. How someone so present in our collective memory could be forgotten in the very industry she helped build. Hollywood has a habit of rewarding the loudest stories, the biggest names, the most marketable faces. Freeman was none of those, but she was everything to the scenes she touched. Like a song's perfect harmony, she was the element you didn't always notice. But without her, the moment fell flat. By the 1990s, Freeman was still working, still lending her voice to animated series, still stepping onto stages, still doing what she loved. But behind that dedication was something she never told the public. She was quietly battling a serious illness. And true to form, she kept it private. She didn't want pity or headlines. She wanted to work. She showed up on sets even when the toll was heavy. She gave every line, every look, her full force, until her final days. That kind of commitment isn't just about professionalism, it's about legacy. She knew her roles weren't always glamorous, but they mattered. And she was determined to leave the stage the same way she entered it, on her own terms. There's something almost haunting about how Freeman exited. No farewell tours, no magazine covers, no tearful interviews. She simply slipped away, leaving behind a legacy that most people barely knew existed. But those who watched her work, really watched, know the truth. She was never just a background character. She was the glue that held chaotic scenes together, the spark that turned forgettable roles into memorable moments. And behind all of that was a woman who lived bravely, loved privately, and never stopped believing in the power of performance. There's a strange kind of power in someone who never demanded attention but earned it anyway. Freeman didn't chase fame, but she etched herself into pop culture through sheer talent. From her biting one-liners to her ability to shift a scene's entire rhythm with one expression, she was a master of her craft. And yet, Hollywood never quite knew what to do with her. She didn't fit their mold. She wasn't the ingenue, the bombshell, or the dramatic lead. She was something rarer, an unshakable presence, a true artist who never needed the spotlight to burn brightly. Imagine being part of the cultural fabric of generations and still being a mystery to the very audience you entertained. That was Freeman's reality. She was known to millions but known deeply by few. And maybe that's why her story resonates now more than ever. Because we're finally starting to value the ones who carried the stories without ever becoming the headline. Freeman's life wasn't lived loudly, but it was lived fully, on her own terms. And in a world that often trades privacy for popularity, that kind of quiet strength feels revolutionary. It makes you wonder how many more stories like hers are hiding in the corners of Hollywood, how many powerhouse performers have faded into the background, their legacies dimmed by time and oversight. Freeman's life pulls back that curtain. It shows us the cost of being essential, but invisible, brilliant, but boxed in. And perhaps, most heartbreakingly, It reveals how little we often know about the people who shape our most beloved memories. She might not have had a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but she had something more lasting: impact. Think about that the next time you watch a classic sitcom rerun or a vintage film. That voice, that face, that timing, that's Kathleen Freeman, the woman who made you laugh, made you care, and made you look twice, even if you didn't know her name. And maybe now you finally will. Because stories like hers, layered with talent, loyalty, sacrifice, and hidden truths, aren't just worth telling. They're necessary. They remind us that behind every beloved scene is a performer who gave everything, even when no one was watching. They had shared decades together, but no labels, no declarations, just a quiet rhythm that never needed outside validation. Helen Ramsey was by Kathleen Freeman's side through it all. The world speculated, were they companions, partners, soulmates? Freeman never said a word, and in that silence, she carved her truth in stone. In a town where every glance gets magnified and every whisper becomes a headline, her refusal to explain was a form of power. While Hollywood loved performance, Freeman's deepest relationship remained unperformed. She lived that love in private, not because it was shameful, but because it was hers. And yet, that restraint wasn't a retreat. It was defiance. In an era when a single confession could end a career, Freeman safeguarded the one part of her life that felt untouchable. They traveled together, lived together, laughed quietly behind closed doors, and made a life far from flashing cameras. She didn't need the world's approval to feel whole. That choice, while it may seem muted, echoed louder than any red carpet moment ever could. This wasn't silence, it was armor. But the spotlight never lost her completely. Just when Hollywood seemed to dim, Kathleen turned toward something even brighter: the stage. While most actors her age were quietly fading into retirement or tucked into background roles, Freeman was just getting started. Again. And what happened next became one of the most astonishing revivals in recent memory. Picture this. She's in her late 70s. The roles have stopped coming, and the town has moved on. But instead of bowing out, she walked into a Broadway theater and absolutely took over. Stepping into the role of Jeanette Burmeister in the hit musical The Full Monty, Freeman became the heartbeat of the show. Her character was tough, funny, and razor-sharp, just like her. But this wasn't just another role. It felt like someone had finally written a script that understood her fully. Audiences were floored. Critics called her a revelation. And in 2001, she was nominated for a Tony Award at 78 years old. It was the kind of recognition she had been denied for decades, and yet she accepted it with the same humility that marked her career. The moment wasn't just about applause. It was about being seen for the first time on her own terms. Backstage, she was electric. Castmates described her as a whirlwind, witty, unfiltered, fiercely focused. She was the kind of performer who lifted everyone around her, someone who didn't just memorize lines, but ignited them. Yet behind that spark was a truth no one suspected. While making audiences laugh night after night, Freeman was quietly fighting for her life. She had been diagnosed with lung cancer, but she never let it slow her down. Most of her colleagues had no idea. She kept rehearsing, she kept performing, and she never let the weight of the diagnosis steal her momentum. She once whispered to a co-star, "As long as I've got air in my lungs, I'm hitting that stage." And she meant it. Through pain and exhaustion, she kept showing up, not because she had something to prove, but because the stage was the only place where she felt truly herself. For her, Acting wasn't a job, it was salvation. The applause wasn't validation, it was fuel. And even as her strength began to wane, her spirit stayed unbreakable. It was the kind of commitment you rarely see anymore. But all stories, even the ones we wish could go on forever, reach their final page. By August 2001, her energy was beginning to fade. She missed a performance. Just one. It was the first time. Friends knew something wasn't right, but she waved it off with that signature grin. "Just a bug," she said. "I'll be back next week." That week never came. The curtain dropped quietly on August 23, 2001, at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills. Freeman was gone. She was 78. News of her passing stunned the industry, not because her name had ever dominated marquee lights, but because those who worked with her knew they had shared space with someone rare. She hadn't just been good at what she did, she had been unforgettable. Her co-stars from the full Monty were blindsided. Many of them had no idea she'd been ill. One quietly said, "She was the engine of our show," and she never once asked for sympathy. That was Kathleen. Even in her final act, she protected the spotlight from turning too harshly in her direction. Tributes rolled in, not from major media outlets, but from actors and directors who knew her work, who had watched her light up dull scenes with just a line or a look. People like Jerry Lewis, who had worked with her for years, called her a genius of timing. Not the kind of genius that demands attention, but the kind that elevates everyone around it. In a business obsessed with fame, Freeman stood as a quiet monument to craft, to consistency, to grace under pressure. There's something haunting about how she left. So quietly, so completely. No press conference, no farewell tour, just silence. But maybe that was the final role she played with absolute precision. The woman who never made a scene about herself bowed out without one. And yet, her absence said more than any spotlight ever could. She reminded us that some of the greatest stories aren't found in awards or headlines, but in the margins, where heart, talent, and resilience collide. Even today, if you watch closely, you'll see her, tucked into reruns, echoing in a line delivery, flickering in the corner of a comedy sketch. She's still there, seen stealing in silence. Kathleen Freeman didn't just pass through Hollywood, she reshaped its background. She didn't fit the mold, so she built her own corner. And though her name may not ring instantly for everyone, her face, her voice, her laugh, those never left. But Kathleen Freeman's story, quiet, courageous, and full of unspoken sacrifice, isn't the only Hollywood narrative demanding a second look. As one curtain fell, another headline was rising, this time pulling us into a storm no one saw coming. Imagine this: a golden-voiced legend steps off the stage and into a legal inferno. That's where the beloved Andre Rieu found himself, grappling with a stunning family revelation that blindsided fans and insiders alike. It wasn't about a lost tour or a career slump. It was personal, deeply. Rieu, a maestro of joy and elegance, was suddenly navigating grief so private, yet so public, it changed the very way we saw him. And here's the twist. Behind the music, behind the sweeping symphonies, Rieu was holding onto something much heavier than a violin. What do you do when the spotlight you built starts to burn? It echoed the same dissonance that haunted Johnny Depp's Renaissance. After years of courtroom spectacle and tabloid torment, Depp has been staging a quiet but powerful return. Less pirate, more poet. But behind those brooding eyes and faded scarves lies a man who has endured the industry's cruelest whiplash. And just when the world was ready to write him off, Depp flipped the script. Here's the hook. He didn't just reclaim his image, he redesigned it. He traded the blockbuster madness for independent grit, focusing on projects that echoed his truth rather than inflated his paycheck. And in doing so, he reminded us, reinvention isn't about starting over. It's about cutting away everything that never belonged to you in the first place. And yet, even reinvention has its shadows. Just ask Loretta Lynn's inner circle, still reeling from a wave of posthumous conflicts that no one was ready for. What began as a quiet legacy tour quickly unraveled into whispered disputes over estates, archives, and control of the Lynn name. Her empire wasn't just made of music, it was stitched into American history. So when those threads started pulling apart, people noticed. And the real question surfaced. How do you protect a legend when the legend's no longer here to defend herself? In the same breath, we're watching the shocking unraveling of a brand once seen as bulletproof, WWE. With Vince McMahon stepping into a storm of controversy and his once loyal roster fracturing under media heat, this isn't just a scandal, it's a seismic shift in sports entertainment. And here's the hook that no one's talking about. This isn't just about McMahon. It's about the entire house of cards. As details surface and ex-stars speak out, fans are asking, was the spectacle always a mask? And who's really pulling the strings now? While chaos surrounds the ring, Dean Martin's name has quietly resurfaced in estate conversations and luxury retrospectives. Once the king of cool, Martin's posthumous brand is experiencing a renaissance of its own. From rare vinyl box sets to exclusive Sinatra collaborations being remastered for streaming, Martin's ghost is cashing in. And not just artistically, financially, his family is managing a legacy that still commands major licensing deals and estate-backed brand ventures. It's a reminder that even in silence, some stars never truly go dark. But it's the story of Diane Lane that's delivering perhaps the most unexpected emotional punch. Lane, once known for her magnetic screen presence and timeless beauty, recently opened up in a rare, soul-bearing interview. She didn't speak in metaphors. She didn't spin tales. She simply said what few in her position dare to, "I forgot how to breathe while chasing perfection." In that moment, Lane stopped being an actress and became a mirror for every person who's ever felt hollow at the top. It wasn't a confession. It was a lifeline to those still pretending. And just when we thought Hollywood had lost its sense of magic, in walks Guy Madison. Not literally, but through a wave of nostalgia, now reclaiming old-school masculinity with a vintage twist. His name, once buried under decades of Western reruns, is back in fashion conversations, in luxury collections inspired by his rugged aesthetic, and even in film school syllabi. Madison didn't need scandal. His legacy rides on something rare, consistency. He was never loud, never wild, just solid. And in today's climate, that kind of grounded charisma feels like gold. But what ties all of these names together? The truth beneath the glitter. Their lives weren't only measured by fame, but by what they endured after the spotlight moved on. Their tragedies weren't always public, but their strength echoed far beyond studio walls. These were stars who were forced to play by rules that weren't built for them, and still, they showed up. That's not just resilience, that's grace. Take Johnny Depp's financial blueprint, for instance. Once known for lavish spending that included a $30,000 monthly wine budget and a private island, Depp's recent turnaround shows surprising maturity. He's downsized but diversified, focusing on art investments, small production houses, and collectible guitars. His watch collection boasts limited edition Rolexes and vintage Cartiers. He's owned multiple estates, from a French village to Hollywood Hills mansions. Private jets. Once, yes. Now, not so much. He's reportedly renegotiated his insurance policies to include tighter health and performance clauses, a sign he's future-proofing his assets. The takeaway? Learn from your indulgences, but never let them define you. In the end, all these lives, whether quietly fading or roaring back, teach us something crucial. You don't need a spotlight to matter. You don't need headlines to leave a mark. Kathleen Freeman's silent brilliance, Andre Rieu's heartbreak, Johnny Depp's reset, and Diane Lane's quiet courage. They all remind us that legacy isn't about how loud your story is. It's about how deeply it echoes once the sound is gone. Because the real stars, they shine long after the credits roll.